Hi, everyone. Hold on to your horses and tighten up your britches. Today, I have yet another set of shocking stories that are sure to make your head spin. You might even learn the truth about something that makes it impossible for you to sleep tonight. So get yourself comfortable, grab your favorite drink, and cozy up with that subscribe button. Thanks. Now let's get into the stories. I was on my way to Yellowstone National Park when we had an encounter that I still barely believe. My buddy Mike and I were driving from Denver to Wyoming for a much-needed break from the city. The journey was long, over an 8-hour drive, but uneventful, at least until the last bit along 26 when we hit a stretch of road surrounded by trees. The car started wobbling and then suddenly jerked to the side, and I realized we had a flat tire. I managed to find a spot to pull over to the side of the road, thankfully near a bunch of trees that provided some shade in the heat. As I worked to take all of our stuff out of the trunk and wrestled getting the spare tire out and the tiny jack that came with the car, I heard a rustling sound from the forest and a noise that sounded like somebody whistling. I looked over to see a man emerging from the trees. He was tall, with a scruffy beard and a hat that covered most of his face. He looked like he had been out there a while. "Need some help?" he asked, with his voice gruff. "No thanks, I've got it," I replied, not really wanting to engage with a stranger in the middle of nowhere. "Good," he said, "because I'm not here to help. I'm here to take what you've got." I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but just as I was about to respond and tell him to get lost, a low growl echoed through the forest. It was deep, and it rumbled the ground below all of us. We all turned towards the sound, and there, walking out of the trees, was a creature that looked like something from a horror movie. It was tall, standing on two legs like a human, but its body was covered in thick, dark fur. Its head was that of a dog, but larger, with ears pointed and tufts of fur at the ends, and glowing yellow eyes. I instantly knew we were encountering a dogman, a creature that I've only heard of in urban legends. The sight was both terrifying and mesmerizing. The creature was massive, with its muscular body rippling under its fur as it moved. Its eyes were focused on all three of us, looking back and forth, from the man to me to Mike, reflecting a strange intelligence that sent chills down my spine. It let out another growl, deeper this time, and the man who was threatening us moments ago looked petrified. He dropped the knife he was pointing at us and ran back into the forest, leaving us alone with the thing. I was scared, but also strangely calm. The thing didn't seem to want to hurt us. It just stood there, watching, its head moving back and forth as if it were listening, trying to study us. After a few moments of doing that, it turned around and disappeared back into the forest, the shape of it blending seamlessly with the shadows, perfectly camouflaged. I let out a sigh of relief and turned back towards the car. Thank goodness I was able to quickly change the tire and get us back on the road. Mike and I were silent for a while, each lost in our own thoughts. The adrenaline was slowly wearing off, replaced now by a sense of wonder and disbelief. We had just seen a creature that was supposed to be a myth, a legend, and yet there it was, as real as the trees around us. We decided to stop at the next town to collect ourselves, grab a bite to eat, and process what had just happened. We found a small diner and we ordered burgers and fries, comfort food to calm our nerves. As we waited for our food, I noticed a newspaper article pinned to the wall. The headline on it read, "Creature Sightings on the Rise in Yellowstone." I pointed it out to Mike, and we both checked it out. It talked about multiple sightings of a creature matching the description of what we had seen, all around Yellowstone. Some people believed it was a hoax, others were convinced it was real. The article ended with a warning to be cautious and to report any sightings to the local authorities. We both looked at each other, unsure of what to do. Should we report what we saw? Would anybody believe us? In the end, we decided to keep our encounter to ourselves. The rest of the trip was uneventful, but the encounter with that creature changed our perspective. We were more aware of our surroundings, more respectful of the wilderness. We realized that there were things out there that we don't understand, creatures that defy explanation. While we didn't see it again, we both thought we could feel its presence. At least it was a sense of being watched that was quite eerie. We left the park with a newfound respect for nature and all of its mysteries. As we drove back to Denver, we talked about our trip and the thing that we saw. We agreed that it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, something we'd remember for the rest of our lives that most other people do not get to experience. We also agreed to keep the story to ourselves. And so, our adventure ended, not with a bang, but with a whisper that reminded us that we are not alone, that we share this world with creatures beyond our understanding. My name is Jack. A buddy of mine told me about this channel and said that I should share my story. I wasn't too into that at first, but I think it's about time I let it all out. So this all kicked off during a solo hiking trip that I took in Glacier National Park. I've always been a bit of a loner. I enjoy peace and quiet and solitude. I had been hiking all day, just me and the wilderness, and when I got back to my campsite, I realized that I had left my water bottle along the trail. So I decided to head back out to get it. Now I know that might sound weird, but I remembered where I'd left it and it wasn't too far back. Also, stupidly, it's all I had with me to use as a canteen. It was pretty dark, but I had my headlamp on, so I wasn't too worried. As I was walking, I kept noticing this strange light in the distance. It was like a spotlight, but it was flickering on and off. And also it was coming from the sky. I thought it was odd, but I kept going. And then just a few minutes later, I saw it. This thing. At first I thought it was a man, another person on the trail. But there was something off about him. It was too tall, too thin, and its head was too big. It was still a bit in the shadows, and it seemed like the body was frail and the eyes were deep black. But there was something behind those eyes, and I felt them sort of pull me in. Even though I knew better, there was something about that thing that drew me closer. I just kept walking closer and closer to it, and soon enough I found myself about 15 feet from it. Now I could see that the skin was smooth, like a dolphin, but with these bulging veins all over. At the end of the skinny arms were long, thin fingers that wouldn't stop moving. They looked like jellyfish tentacles, wiggling all over the place. If it weren't for that massive head, it would almost have looked human, although someone extremely malnourished with knobby knees. Soon enough, I was only 10 feet away, and I realized that this thing had no mouth or nose, just this empty space where they should be. At this time, those deep black eyes were deadlocked straight on me. I felt a ringing in my ears that began to grow sharper and louder with each step forward. The sound vibrated in my skull and surrounded me completely. It started to turn into a low hum. The figure began to vibrate a bit as well, and I couldn't look away from those piercing eyes. Even though I was initially scared and confused, the sound started to calm me. It sounded like a terrifying lullaby, and I felt hypnotized as I crept closer and closer. Suddenly, a bright white light began to shine down from the sky. It blinded me for a moment, so I bent down and I covered my eyes with my hands. After the initial shock of the white flare, I peered out from my fingers. The creature was gone, and the trail was pitch black again. I used my headlamp to scan the area, but I couldn't see anything besides the trees, the rocks, and the distant mountains. I took a deep breath, and I immediately regretted it. There was a strong stench, almost like rotting eggs and mulch. I couldn't see anything that could have caused the smell, and I think it could have been from the thing I saw. Once I regained my composure, I turned around and I walked back to the campsite. I couldn't sleep that night. I didn't even go into my tent. I just sat there staring at the fire the entire night and into the morning. I decided to pack up and head home a few days early. I just couldn't explain what I had seen without sounding crazy, even to myself. I wanted to just forget the creature. I wanted to just leave it in the park and carry on like normal. But even now, every time I close my eyes to go to sleep, all I can see are those black eyes staring back at me. A few times I even woke up in a cold sweat, the sound of that eerie hum still ringing in my ears. This went on for a week, and then one night, it just stopped. It took me a few more weeks to really come to terms with what I had seen, but eventually I started doing some research to try to figure out what it could have been. After going through countless blog posts, forum threads, and hitting a lot of dead ends, I had to face the fact that I'd seen an alien. There have been a few sightings here in Montana, especially in Glacier. That bright beam of light must have been its ship. Strangely, lately, I've been thinking of going back to the park. I'm starting to not be scared, which actually worries me. Like, does that thing have some control of my mind? The more I think about it, the more certain I am that there are more of its kind out there, and probably more are coming. If any of you out there have had similar experiences, I'd love to hear about them. Thanks for listening to mine. So, I took a trip to California last summer. You know, the usual tourist stuff. But I was staying in this little beach house that I had rented from the local tourist office website. It was right on the coast, and I was planning to surf and just chill out for the week. Everything was going great at first. I got there early, settled in. Everything seemed normal, just as it should. I was having a great time until the third night when I was out on the deck grilling some burgers, and I noticed something odd. At first, it was just this smell. It was awful, like rotten fish mixed with seaweed. Just nasty. It seemed far off, but it was definitely there. Had this been the first night, I would have thought the smell was coming from the ocean. But this was something new, a smell that hadn't been there before. In fact, it got to be so bad that I decided to just eat inside once the burgers were done. But then I heard this weird sound, too. It was like a cry for help, but it didn't sound right. It was like someone or something was trying to mimic a human voice. Now, I've seen enough horror movies to know not to go wandering off in the dark when you hear something weird, but I just couldn't ignore it. So I decided to only go as far as I could while still keeping the beach house in sight. I started walking towards the sound, and coincidentally, the smell got worse. It was like nothing I had ever smelled before, and it made me want to turn back. But I kept going, strangely. And as I got closer, the sound got weirder. Now it was like a recording or something. I looked around, and then I saw it. A silhouette in the moonlight. It was huge, way too big to be a person. I couldn't get a good look at it, but when I saw the shape and the size of it, I knew nothing good was going to come from that thing. So that's when I turned around and booked back to the beach house. The next day, I went to the local tourist office to tell them what happened, to see if there had been any other reports or sightings of anything strange. The guy there didn't seem interested until I got into some of the details and mentioned the size of the thing. And that's when he went pale and offered me a refund if I wanted to leave early. Now, I've never heard of getting a refund for spotting something weird, but I decided to just stay put to see how the next day went. But after that first night, I was pretty shaken up, but I still decided to stick it out just that one more day. I mean, I didn't want to let one weird experience ruin my trip. But that coming night, things got even weirder. I was inside watching TV when I heard that same cry for help. This time it was way closer, like it was right outside the beach house door that faces the ocean. I cautiously stood up and looked out the window, and there it was, standing on the beach close to the house, silhouetted against the moonlit waves. This time I got a better look at it. It was massive, like 8 feet tall, and it had these long, spindly arms that ended in claws. And the face, well, it didn't have one, just this gaping hole where its face should have been. I was wide-eyed just watching this thing on the beach, but then it started moving towards the house even closer, and its movements were jerky and unnatural. I could hear it making that weird cry for help over and over like a broken record. I snapped out of my fear. I ran to the other side of the house, locked all the doors, all the windows. I could hear it outside, scratching at the door now, making that awful sound. I stayed far in the back room, too scared to move, and I just waited there until the sun came up. All night long, I listened to these strange noises. Some, I'm sure, were the creature, but some, I think, were made up by my mind playing tricks on me. Either way, I did make it through the night alive and without incident. The next morning, I went out. No sign of the creature. The door was all scratched up, though, but otherwise, everything seemed normal. I sure was glad I had told the tourist office about what I had seen, given the state of the door. But I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. I packed up my stuff, and I just left. I turned in my key, and I told them I would never be back. So that's my story. I don't know what I saw on that beach, but I know it wasn't human. I also don't know where it came from, if it lives in the ocean or just nearby, or what. All I can say is that if you ever find yourself on the California coast, be careful. And if you smell something rotten, get out of there fast. You don't want to meet whatever it is that I saw. So let me tell you, it's been a real comfort tuning into your channel. It makes me feel less like I've lost my marbles. But I'll be straight with you, it doesn't mean I'm about to go traipsing through any mountains, caves, or even just the wilderness again. Heck, sometimes I don't even want to step out of my house after what I saw. My friends think I've gone off the deep end. My family, too. My buddies reckon I'm just trying to get attention. And the cops, they straight up told me to come up with a better prank and maybe see a shrink. But I'll tell you exactly what I saw, and I think you'll believe me. People need to know about this, everywhere. So here's the story. I was traveling through North Dakota about 2.5 hours from my house. I'm not much of a wanderer usually, but I'd recently gone through a divorce. I just needed some fresh air, maybe even some nice scenery to take my mind off things. I parked my car and I just started walking. I didn't follow any specific path, I just made my own. I had my phone set to track my route so I wouldn't get lost. As I was wandering, I got some pretty nice shots of the vast plains, some interesting rock formations, even a prairie dog. I was really enjoying myself just breathing in the fresh air and making my own way. So I'd been going for about 2 hours when I saw a large hole in the side of the hill. It wasn't too far from me and it was a manageable climb. So I stopped and decided to go. And when I got to the hole, I stuck my head in and it was pitch black. I was intrigued. So I turned on my phone's flashlight and that's when I realized this was a legitimate cave. I got a little carried away thinking about how I had discovered a cave, wondering if anybody else had ever stopped and been up here. I was excited. Of course, I ducked down and I went in. I went in a few feet. I was being super careful, but I could see a smooth rock floor beneath me. I felt safe enough, so I kept walking forward and following the light from my flashlight, taking a picture here and there. I was maybe 15 or 16 feet in when I realized it was a huge cavern, a cave room, and there were a few openings in the walls surrounding the cavern. I picked the closest one, and I looked in there. It was another tunnel. I could tell it was big enough to walk through, so I stepped through the opening and carefully walked a few more feet in. I then heard a skittering sound. I stopped walking, thinking maybe I had kicked something, or a small animal was running away. I looked all around on the ground, but I saw nothing. But I heard the skittering again. And when I raised my phone up to look ahead of me, I saw a full figure. Only it wasn't a person, but it didn't have any clothes on, and it looked malnourished. It was crouched down on its hands and its feet about 4 feet in front of me. It was pale, like maybe it had never even ever been in the sun. Its face was sunken in, and I could clearly see its cheekbones. And it had all black eyes, not just pupils like us, but all black. Between its hands on the ground was a half-eaten prairie dog. I don't want to get too detailed because some people may have weak stomachs. I honestly thought I might hurl. I then heard the skittering sound again, and I realized that the thing that I was seeing was making the noise. I watched as it went across the floor, and I don't know how I knew, but I knew that it was trying to get its friends or family, basically backup, but it was trying to communicate and not with me. I moved back towards the way I came, but I kept my flashlight on it. It didn't seem to like the light too much. It didn't even try to move towards me at all when I had that shone on it. I was able to get back out through the hole, and I took a quick look around. I didn't see anything else. I then ran for my life back the way I came. I could hear skittering, and it was getting closer and louder. It sounded to me like there were now more than one. I now felt like that prairie dog, like I was being hunted. I was able to see the light from the original opening when I tripped. I dropped my phone. I'm not even going to lie. I didn't even try to pick it up. I got right on up and got out of that hole, out into the sunshine. I ran down that hill. I was panting so hard, but my adrenaline would not let me stop. I only stopped when I was sure nothing had followed me out. I realized now I had no phone and no idea where I was. But honestly, I was just happy to be alive. I did eventually find a trail, and I managed to make it back to my car. I drove on ahead down the road and ended up in a small town where I went to the local police station. But that was pointless. They wouldn't take me seriously, so I just asked them my way back home and headed there. When I got home, I was able to check the phone's location. When I used the satellite feature, all I could see was a heavily wooded area. No cave. The last time I checked the location of my phone, it had moved over a mile away from the original place I had dropped it. It only had about 3% battery left, so it's long since died since then. That's what happened. I feel like I could have been eaten by that thing. I'm so lucky that I didn't freeze up and was able to get out of there. I honestly wish I had taken a picture when I first saw that pale figure. I didn't even think about it, because guess what? All of my other pictures uploaded to the cloud. Anyway, please guys, don't go into any unexplored caves, especially not by yourself. I mean, even caves that have been explored are probably dangerous. I know I'll never go in one again.